Welcome back to the CW30 News at 7. Our big story tonight, the legacy of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the push to nominate her successor before Election Day. Joining us is Elizabeth Kronk Warner, Dean of the University of Utah's S.J. Quinney College of Law. Elizabeth, thank you for joining us on the show.
My pleasure.
Elizabeth, what were some of Ginsburg's defining moments as the Supreme Court Justice?
She had many, but for me, I think two things really stand out. The first was her decision in the United States versus Virginia, which many will recall was the case involving the Virginia Military Institute and its then policy allowing only for men to apply and to attend the institute. And of course, she voted and wrote in the majority that such discriminatory policies based on gender no longer had a place in the United States. And so I think for many people who remember her legacy, that was a culmination of a life's work towards gender equality. I think the second thing that she's oftentimes remembered for in terms of her service to the U.S. Supreme Court was the fact that she dissented, and she dissented vigorously. So she really gave new meaning to this idea of I dissent and what it meant to dissent, and setting up dissents as this idea of laying the foundation for future changes to the law. And so those are two things that immediately come to mind when I think of Justice Ginsburg and her legacy at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right, and when we look at her legacy, there are so many moments, right, that we could really take a look at. So I appreciate you narrowing that down for us. As soon as she passed away, we saw an emotional and passionate response from the public. I saw a lot of posts about her on my social media. Why would you say that the community was so impacted by her loss?
I think there are a lot of reasons. You know, one, she had this amazing capacity that even though many of us did not have the privilege to know her personally, she still touched our lives. She was very outgoing. One of the things I've noticed on Facebook recently are the number of pictures that people have been posting of themselves and Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So the fact that she got out, she left Washington, D.C., she really did her part in reaching out to the American public, I think made a difference. But even more than that, I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg really stands for this idea of the American dream, this idea that anyone can become something great in the United States. So if we put her career into its context, we can see that, first of all, she ascended and accomplished wonderful things as a woman at a time when very few women were in law school, and certainly very few women were taking on high-profile legal careers. She went on to become a law professor at a time when there's a story about her. She was pregnant and she was going up for tenure, and she was worried because of the possibility that her pregnancy may negatively impact her ability to become tenured. And so she wore big fitting outfits so that her pregnancy was hidden. That, as somebody who was pregnant myself during the tenure process, the idea that she had to do that is just something that is horrible in my mind. But she lived through that and she accomplished many things. And then she went on above and beyond that to become a Supreme Court justice. And at the time that she was appointed by President Clinton, some people thought that she was perhaps too old to be a U.S. Supreme Court justice. So not only did she overcome sexism and restrictions based on her gender, but she also overcame ageism later in her life. And I think really tells us and shows us that older women are not to be overlooked and not to be forgotten, and can play really important lives in our community.
Yeah, and I think it really shows like how far we've come, but how much more we need to continue on with this work. Now, Elizabeth, let's hold that thought. We need to take a commercial break, but when we come back, we'll go in depth on the push to name a Supreme Court nominee before the election. We'll be right back.
Live from Utah's CW30, ABC4 News at 7:30 starts now.
Welcome back to the CW30 News at 7. I'm Rosie Nguyen. We're discussing the legacy of the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Just as important, we're focusing our lens on the push to name her replacement and the frontrunners. Elizabeth Kronk Warner, Dean of the University of Utah's S.J. Quinney College of Law, is still with us. Elizabeth, transitioning now, let's talk about the extraordinary times that our country finds ourselves in. What's the significance behind the timing of RBG's death?
I think there are many things that are important behind her death and its timing. So the first is that for many people in the United States, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was seen as a liberal icon, as somebody who promoted equal rights and promoted equality across the United States. So the fact that her death is coming so close to an election when times are already tense certainly is provided some instability across the country. And then I think more specifically for those of us who are involved in the legal community and who watch the United States Supreme Court, there is deep interest in what's going to happen now that we have traditionally, although not always, but traditionally would vote more on the liberal side of the court. So what does that mean in terms of the court's balance moving forward?
Right. President Trump said that he will nominate a pick to replace RBG, which the Republican-led Senate will then be able to vote on. But Democrats want the Senate to hold on until after the election. So what's your take on everything that's going on in Washington right now?
Yes, so there are definitely some interesting political contests that are happening in our nation's capital. And really they center around not necessarily legal arguments, but public policy arguments. This idea of what makes sense in terms of past precedent, and then also what makes sense for our country. So I think in terms of past precedent, you have the Democrats saying that something very similar to this scenario obviously happened after the passing of Anton Scalia. And then you also have the concern of what her death and then, of course, an immediate reaction by filling her vacancy will mean for the United States as a whole and for society, given her place as a liberal icon for many individuals.
And really going off of that, in 2016, the Republicans blocked President Obama from naming a successor to the late Justice Scalia. And there was, at the time, 9 months still to go before the election, but this year we're just weeks away. So what are some of the key differences between 2016 and then now?
Right. So Rosie, as you identify, one of the differences is the timing. So it's my understanding that Justice Ginsburg's death comes the second closest of any justice's death to an election. So her death and its timing to the election itself is certainly a difference from Anton Scalia's passing, which happened approximately 9 months before the election. So there's a timing difference. But also, as we saw in Senator McConnell's statement that came immediately after her passing, another difference is who controls both the Senate and the presidency. So he based his statement and differentiating the two instances on the fact that both the presidency and the Senate are currently controlled by Republicans.
Right. Okay, so if President Trump makes it, as many believe and as he has said, do you think it's a done deal?
I think many people believe that it's likely. We have heard from some senators who have that they are uncomfortable voting in a nominee. We've also heard from our own senator, Senator Romney, who said that he's going to vote on the qualifications of the individual, saying that he's going to wait and see until we know who the actual nominee is. So there is some discussion to suggest that it is not a done deal, but the fact that it is a simple majority that is required to confirm a Supreme Court justice, and the Republicans do have the majority in the Senate, does suggest that it is likely that a nominee would be confirmed.
All right, Elizabeth Kronk Warner, Dean of the University of Utah's S.J. Quinney College of Law, thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for your insight. Please come join us again.
Thank you.